Iran has really popped off again with the biggest strike since the ceasefire was announced, and the markets are swinging hard. Oil is up, gold is down. It is not the right up and down that I like to hear in my rap songs, but nonetheless, that's what's going on. Investors now are really assuming that inflation is just going to continue to increase. So if you're wondering why you've got oil in a time of uncertainty, you expect gold to be the thing that's stable. I think everybody understands why oil is spiking, but why is gold going down? And that's because people are far more afraid of inflation going up, which means rates are going to be kept up, which means the risk-free rate of return is now going up. And so being in something that doesn't return, like gold, is just not the play, at least as far as investors are going with what has just happened. You can expect the markets to continue to be very weird. Things were quiet for a while, but the MOU now is just, it is such a vague mess when you really understand what both sides, I think, are doing. It is obvious that this was always going to be litigated through violence because both sides have said the things that they needed to say. They've said those shibboleths to buy themselves time to regroup. Trump was trying to calm the markets. Never be confused about that. And Iran needed some cash, and they were both all too happy to give the other what they needed to buy that time, but there was no real available piece in the MOU. If you guys read the MOU, it was so ridiculously vague. And then both sides were just going out to the media and saying basically the exact opposite of the things that were in the MOU. It was wildest shit I've ever seen. And so it was obvious that the peace was not going to last long. Now, the specific spark that kicked things off with Iran this time was that they attacked 3 ships that were transiting the strait. It's always when people are hugging the coast of Oman. And so that is what triggered them. They were saying that these were not routes that they had authorized. Now, them attacking the ships that were going through the strait obviously pissed off Trump. So he then hit them back with the biggest attack since the ceasefire was announced. He said, in fact, we should pull that clip up, but he said straight up that he thinks the talks are over. He left just a little bit of softness in his language for more negotiations to continue, but he did call Iran scum. So let's play that clip.
Is the ceasefire done? Is the MOU dead?
It's a very interesting question.
Yes, it is.
To me, I think it's over. I don't want to deal with them anymore. They're scum.
So yeah, you can expect this to continue. This is going to be something where bombs are going to be the ultimate negotiator. Trump is talking like he's not in complete control of this. If he tells Wickoff and Kushner that the negotiations are over, then they're over. So the fact that he's still sending them back in tells you that he always wants to have that card that he can play in his back pocket of like, hey, we're back to negotiating. You can watch interest rates. I mean, it's really pretty wild. I guess it shouldn't be unexpected, but it is pretty wild that the negotiations are predicated on what the market will bear in terms of Trump's tolerance for stress in the stock market. I don't see any way out of this. So you either litigate via war, knowing that that is the ultimate leverage point, or you're just going to be in this position. Now, you can mentally model Iran however you want. The most common mental model for Iran is that they're going to buy themselves as much time. They're going to tell you everything that you want to hear so that they can keep kicking the can down the road. I've talked about this in business. This is absolutely something that whenever you can, you want to buy yourself time for things to work out more naturally. And so whenever, not that in business it's advisable to lie, because if you're doing that, you're just going to absolutely blow your reputation apart. You're not going to be able to get anything done. But if you see an opportunity to buy yourself a day or a week when you're not able to get the things that you want, you never know when something might appear. And so this is Iran's strategy through and through. Everybody has talked about this, about their strategy of deploying delay tactics by promising you something that they never planned to deliver on. This, to me, is yet another punctuation mark that we're going to see over and over and over until something finally makes this come to a head. And I don't know if that's getting on the other side of the midterms. There are plenty of analysts that think no matter what happens, whether Trump wins or loses, on the other side of this, he's going to be unbridled. If he wins, obviously he's going to have wind at his back and he can go in and get back to bombing things and not have to worry about the election. If he loses the election, then he really has nothing to lose. Obviously, Congress is going to be pushing to impeach him basically immediately, but he'll still be able to do things through executive order. And so if you guys remember what happened when Obama ended up losing the midterms He said, well, I still have a phone and I still have a pen, I think is exactly how he said it, meaning the executive orders. And so expect Trump to do that exact thing and just go back to running the same kind of blitz of EOs that we saw at the beginning of his term. So I'm not expecting anything to play this out other than this constant back and forth of peace to either on our side calm the markets or on their side rebuild a war chest, followed by, okay, now we can go back to being violent because we just do not agree on anything. If you listen to the things that Iran is actually saying, all the key elements of the MOU that'll make this a deal, that they're never going to have nuclear weapons, what Israel is doing in terms of Lebanon, which continues to be this big question mark about how Lebanon feels about that. But anyway, so you've got that going on. You've got the Strait being open, them not being able to charge. You've got them obviously expecting the $300 billion in, they're not calling it reparations, but I'll call it reparations. So do not expect any of this to go smoothly. This is going to be something that will be played out with strike after strike after strike. Now, the markets are getting that message very clearly. And on the back of this most recent strike, Brent jumped more than 6% to nearly $79 a barrel. Now, that's a far cry from where we were when we were up over 100, but it is the biggest one-day move since early June. Dow futures have dropped over 400 points. Energy stocks have rallied pre-market because they're expecting the price to go up. And chips, those stocks just keep selling off. All of the peace gains that we made basically have been immediately unwound. Now, that doesn't mean that they won't reassert themselves if we go back to peace, but that's going to be the sort of ping-ponging you can expect in the markets. Now, there are rumors right now that the U.S. is going to put up their naval blockade as early as today. We'll see if that actually happens. But if that does happen, then I imagine that the markets are going to swing even harder, expecting this to really go back to driving inflation. I think you'll see Brent go up even more. Will we start pushing 80s and 90s again? I think it's very likely if we go into the blockade and we see a week go by without any other movement. I would expect to see that number go up. And that's also going to hold the Fed, hold their feet to the fire in terms of having to hold their interest rates high for longer. So anybody that was still, fingers crossed, holding out that the rates were going to be coming down soon, it's going to be tough to do that when you've got oil prices going up and up. So that is the standoff that we're really in. So we'll see. All right. As for the details of this most recent flashpoint, the ships that Iran hit, as I was saying earlier, were the ones that were using unapproved routes. The CENTCOM targets that were hit were Iranian air defenses, radar, and more than 60 IRGC fast boats. They've also claimed that they've hit and killed some more IRGC leadership, but that really does seem to be a never-ending basket of people that they can draw on. So I would not expect there to be any sort of, oh, we finally hit the one guy. That just isn't going to happen. So maybe more instability, maybe more infighting, but nonetheless, don't expect us to be able to kill our way to a better regime over there. Now, Scott Bessent has also brought the U.S. Treasury into the strikes. They've launched some attacks of their own, revoked the oil sanctions waiver that had been refilling Iran's coffers. And that's the thing that in all of this is maddening to me. It was self-evident that the second you do that, Iran, who has made it abundantly clear in their rhetoric and how vague the things are in the MOU, that they just want to get money going again. Once they do that, then they're going to leverage that to build up their strength so that they can negotiate even harder. Oil sales are roughly half of Iran's revenue. So to give you an idea, you can cut off half, but then the second you open those spigots again, real money is flowing in. And the administration has given buyers until July 17th to wind down their transactions, but Lord only knows how much is going to happen in the 9 days between now and then. So we'll see. Now, needless to say, Iran has hated all of this, and they fired back this morning. They sent missiles and drones at U.S. bases in Bahrain and Kuwait. Kuwait says that it intercepted everything, that there was no damage, no casualties. But Iran has warned U.S. allies in the region, specifically the UAE, that there are going to be no more restraints on their attacks on their infrastructure. So expect that to get better, or expect that to get worse before it gets better. It is wild. I'm actually surprised how energy prices have held on between what's going on in Russia and what's going on in the Strait. And they're talking about the Red Sea now. So this really could get wild. And it's going to be interesting to see if we, meaning the West more broadly, can actually start working around the Strait of Hormuz. So necessity is the mother of invention. So we'll see if we see places like the UAE, Saudi Arabia, building more and more pipelines to get around. Saudi Arabia has done a phenomenal job of that already, working around a lot of the strait. I forget the exact percentage, but I think it was somewhere around 60 or 70% of their oil was now able to bypass the Strait of Hormuz. I don't know if there are reasons that they would prefer not to have to use that, but certainly people are working at a pace to try to get around all of this. But I would expect that to take years to build out something more robust than what's already in place. And the real question becomes, how do you protect that from more strikes from Iran? Given what we're seeing from drone warfare in the Ukraine-Russia war, man, you can do a lot of damage with long-range drones. And I would suspect that Iran is going to have access to very similar kinds of technology as time rolls on. So drones aren't going anywhere. You've even got stuff in China, if you guys have been paying attention to this, they've had massive flooding there, and they're using drones to airlift people out of the flood zone. So drones are getting more and more sophisticated extraordinarily rapidly. So yeah, this one's going to get weird, and it is going to affect the markets, and it's going to force Trump's hand or anybody else's hand that's at the wheel. So regardless of who's in power, energy as it affects inflation is such a big deal. You just cannot look past it. We'll get into this more when we talk about Japan, but it's going to be a rough ride.
I'm going to stake my claim right now. This is a forever war. We're going to be in here at least 2 more years.
Oh,
minimum.
Yeah, Jesus.
Trump's not getting out here before his presidency's done.
I can't imagine. I can't imagine. You're going to see this back and forth, so they're not going to call it a war. There almost certainly will not be ground troops. I know Professor Jiang is just convinced that Trump is going to have to put troops on the ground. I don't put it past him. He has now a long-standing history of making terrible decisions. So it is certainly possible that he ends up doing that. I'm not expecting it, but I am expecting this back and forth, tit for tat kind of thing where he's constantly saying, hey, they're saying all the right things. I know they're saying bad things publicly, but no, this is going to be all good. And so, and that will calm the markets, but it will only do it for a while. And do I want to do a tangent on the real story of the boy who cried wolf? I'll stop for now. But there's,
no, I know, I need that. Come on.
All right, so
foreplay me and let me
here's
like that.
The really fascinating thing about so many of these stories is that the way that they've been sort of smoothed over largely by Disney gives you an unrealistic version of what the actual thing, the moral of the story that we're trying to be told with the original. So in the original, The Boy Who Cried Wolf, story is the kid goes up to the edge of the forest and he sees wolves. He's not making it up. He actually sees wolves. He goes back and he says, hey guys, there's wolves. They all go, check, nope, no wolves. Hey kid, you're lying. Don't fucking do it again. Kid goes back to edge of the forest. The fucking wolves are back. And so he goes back. He's like, guys, I'm telling you, wolves. They go, check, no wolves. This kid, we can't fucking trust him. The wolves are trying to use the boy as a way to convince everybody that the radar system, the early warning people who are like, no, for real, this is a real problem. When it doesn't happen, this is like with the economy, when it doesn't happen again, and people say, people like Peter Schiff have called 9 of the last 2 recessions, you start to go, these guys are full of shit. There's nothing real. And so finally, the kid's like, I don't know what to do. And so he ends up going into the woods and the wolves eat him. And so the kid really does get eaten. Nobody believed him. And then now anybody that tries to go in after the wolves, they get eaten too. And so it is a tale of you do ruin your credibility when you cry wolf and then the wolves hide, but it doesn't mean that there aren't actually wolves there. So that's where I would say, there is going to be a lot of that, whether it's from pundits, whether it's from me saying like, hey, this is going to be risky, or Japan. I can already feel this one. So there's 3 points of spread still between even Japan, like at their worst, and where the US is. So the Japan yen carry trade, it is unwinding. It's going to keep unwinding because you can't hold that forever. And so, but I'm sure people have been saying that for a very long time. But then COVID hits, and now all of a sudden that inflation actually does reach Japan, and now all of a sudden they're having to react. And so people are going to say, this is all bullshit. All these people saying that the Japan carry trade is going to unwind, they're just crying wolf. But remember, the moral of the story is the wolf is really there. And when you go to look for it, it recedes. You walk away, it comes back. You look, and you just keep getting that until finally the wolves attack and you've got a real problem. So expect a lot of that with Iran. Expect this to drag on for a very long time. But remember, ultimately, the kid does get eaten and the wolves really are a problem. And so I would expect that to play out both from Iran actually is a problem. Iran really does have negative intentions towards, I think everybody will get on board that they have very negative intentions towards Israel. But remember, the U.S. is the big Satan, not the little Satan. Israel's the little Satan. What happens as they get ballistic missiles that can reach Europe? What happens if they get ballistic missiles that can reach the U.S.? So it's like, yeah, has Trump done a ton of damage? Have all the people that have said, hey, they're about to get a nuclear weapon, hey, they really want to do bad things? Yes, because then they don't do bad things. But does that mean that it isn't a danger? And I would put forth, no, it doesn't mean that they're not a danger. But it does mean that the way that we're dealing with it right now is not working. So now what? To your point, we've gotten sucked into something that's probably going to last for years with this back and forth, tit for tat. We're in a war, we're not a war. But that doesn't mean that the danger is not real. And that's how you suck people into this stuff. You drag it out just long enough that people finally have to let their guard down to not look like complete dumbasses. Because that's the thing, man. Imagine trying to run on Iran is an imminent threat in 2028. Good luck. Good luck.
Like, we're still there. So everybody, there was Jordan, I think, in the chat was like, Trump needs to apologize and just back out. And I was like, we're already past that point, because Iran, at the very minimum, is going to reject that apology so that way they could do a victory lap around the world and point and say, haha, we beat the U.S., look at us. Like, there's no incentive for us to stop this war unless we just bomb everybody to oblivion and we just kill 90 million people.
Well, we have an incentive to stop the war. That's the bad news. So just like we have an incentive to print, because in the immediate term, it isn't bad. It's bad in the long term. So we've been, the boy who cried wolf has played out phenomenally well with the inflation. So people have been eaten, people are just constantly getting eaten by inflation. But yet we keep saying, no, far better to just keep running these deficits, better than to face the austerity. Same with the war. Trump would in the short term be much better off backing off, because they're not going to get a nuclear weapon before he's out of office, almost certainly. So now you're in a position where somebody finally has to say, okay, this may not play out on my watch, but I really believe that this is true, and I'm going to push this all the way to the end. Is that going to be Trump? Maybe. We'll see. He's very responsive to the markets, if for no other reason than the markets have made him fantastically wealthy by trading on what I'll call insider information, whether it meets the legal definition of that or not, I don't care. It's the spirit, I think, is exactly the same. He knows that his money is contingent on the policies that he passes. And so given that, you can expect him to have a massive incentive to do things that are good for his money. Again, I think that the way Trump thinks through this stuff is, I'm going to do what's good for me. If it happens to be good for America too, great, but I am certainly going to do what's good for me. So he has that personal incentive to calm the markets. So this one is weird. It's like a glitch where there's the sort of Mount Rushmore of it all. Listen, I've laid out my full thesis. I'm not going to do it again here. If people are confused about why I think Trump did what he did, I can certainly answer that. It's not as simplistic as it's what's good in the short term for the markets, but I do think that he's got a long-term vision for needing to get the investments into the US. Anyway, I've talked about this so many times. So you've got all of that at play. There is a reason to end the war. I don't think he'll take it.
Yep, we're going to be here for a while, so get comfortable. Is there pressure from the allies that could possibly force Trump's hand? If Iran is really honest that they're going to take off their quote-unquote restraint, if they start attacking the UAE, Dubai, all these other places, and they feel that pressure, would that be the domino that can make Trump say, okay, we really need to stop this war? Would it ramp up? What do you think his response would be if they really go unhinged?
Well, so I think it's a thought exercise that probably won't play out quite like that, but let's run the thought exercise. So if the allies turn against Trump, yes, it could be untenable for him. If it is literally the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Oman, Qatar, like if they're all like, fucking stop, get out of here. We are booting you out of our bases. Like, we don't want you here anymore. You are not welcome. And they start siding with Iran. Yeah, that could push him out. If Turkey comes online with Iran, which Trump has said nakedly, the only reason that Turkey didn't enter the war on behalf of Iran is because I told them not to. Now, I've got to wonder what he had to promise, because it wasn't just like, hey, bro, please. It would have been that Erdogan sees something that he can get from the US that he wants. I don't know what that is.
Sanction relief.
But there's going to be, that's a great default assumption. If Erdogan comes in, all of the countries in the region are like, you got to get out of here. We don't want you here anymore. Then yes, I think he would then be like, all right, I tried. These guys want to blow themselves up. Then fine. I'd be very interested to see what the relationship, it will matter a lot what the relationship is between the US and Israel at that point as to whether the US completely ejects out of the region or if they just keep funding Israel so that they can fight the fight and go back to basically using Israel as a proxy to try to do something in the region. But certainly if we really do have energy independence in the US, we're able to stabilize our market. We're getting, because we're getting massive cash inflows into the US market right now from all around the world. Like, I don't know that we're at historic levels, but I think we are. I'm only hedging because I don't have the graph in front of me. But if I'm not mistaken, we have literally historic levels of foreign investment, like over the last 60 days. So it is right now, for all of the weirdness in the US market, for all of the missteps that the US is doing, people are looking around the world and they're not seeing anywhere else to put their capital. And capital will always seek a return. And so if there is nowhere better, even if it's just, okay, this is like the best of all my bad options, the money is still pouring in. Now, I think that's predicated on AI. If the AI story crumbles, expect that to stop. Also, if the AI story crumbles, you could have a global recession, especially if it's riding on the back of Japan and, war in the Middle East. So yeah, this gets nested very quickly. I am going to tease these things out more. We're going to be talking about Japan in a minute, but these are the dots that start connecting. You've got energy stress that will affect Europe for sure, maybe even all the way to China. I don't remember how much oil China is getting from Russia, but if you've got Ukraine hitting the energy infrastructure in Russia, you've got Europe continuing to shoot itself in the foot, you've got continued instability in the Middle East. If Iran really does start destroying civilian oil infrastructure all across the region, you could put a real squeeze on the energy markets. Combine that with what's going on in Japan, combine that with a broken AI story, this gets global real fast.
Do you think the AI story is broken? Because I'm on team, it's looking broken.
Here's the problem. To me, the historical trend is so obvious that I am so paranoid about my read. So anybody that, if you ever put in the comments, where does Tom actually invest his money? The reason that I don't post that is because I am so paranoid that I'm going to be blindsided by something. The last thing I want is people being like, well, Tom really understands this stuff, and so this is what he's doing, so I should do the same. Jesus Christ. I live in a constant state of paranoia that either there's a black swan event or I'm not mapping something correctly. And so I am so confident in my read of AI that I'm afraid of myself, if you see what I mean. I fear my confidence. That's when I'm like, oh, there could be something here. So the historical loop that AI is a part of says very clearly that what will happen is whenever you have a truly extraordinary new technology, it will get flooded with investment. It will get way out over its skis, and the early investors will get wiped out. And then what they call the inheritance generation will come along behind those people, take advantage of all the infrastructure that was built, but that bankrupted God knows how many people along the way. And then they'll build over the next 10 to 20 years, they'll build the real surviving companies. And so I'm watching this play out and I'm like, I do not trust myself to get the timing right. I do not want to be overinvested in AI. I don't want to be overinvested even in the US, though right now I probably am. And so all of that is, like, to me, so self-evident a pattern. And by the way, we're now getting the early data that, yeah, this is really playing out like that in terms of look at the revenue going into the AI industry is so much slower than what the debt would tell you it needs to be at this moment. So again, historical parallel, this is exactly what happens with all of these new major real technologies that come on board. They always go through this. And so the revenue is not coming in as fast as you'd like. Also, corporations are now starting to back out. Also, corporations are getting paranoid, the whole Alex Karp rant about, wait, are these companies just basically absorbing my business model through the things that I give to them?
them?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so now it's like they're going to want to lean on these Chinese models that are coming out that are open source. There's potential drama there, but just follow the logic. So they're like, wait, I can actually reduce my cost dramatically. So hold on. You're telling me that we have an industry that needs big revenues right now, way faster than they're getting them, and people are already spending less than expected, and they're trying to optimize to spend dramatically less. It's like, as a consumer, this is great. Just kill the first generation of investors, don't care. Give me the 20-year build to the greatest technology the world has ever seen that's going to totally transform the world. But the gap between even my own analysis at the beginning of this was like, yo, this is going to happen so fast, it's going to eat everything, this is going way faster than I ever could have imagined. And then you start going, actually, I still believe this is all playing out, but I'm not as confident about the timeline assessment. And then you start looking at the historical example and you're like, yeah, it's probably better to bet against it happening in the right period. By bet against, I mean in words. I am not shorting the market. Fuck that. I do not trust my read on this nearly enough for that. But that the intellectual humility as a bet against AI, I think is very wise, rather than saying, oh, this is going to be everything.
We shall see. This is one of those things that I'm really interested at how it plays out, because to your point, so many things are interconnected. Because we have a debt time bomb that's happening. We have our international crutches that we traditionally relied on. Japan for financial, Israel, who now wants to just fight everybody, taking us in two different directions. Russia's getting its reserves bombed, so that might reshuffle the entire I get my oil from like deck. Like there's so many things being stacked up right now that one thing breaking one way can just cause like a domino effect. So
everything is so destabilized right now. It's really unnerving. And the really interesting thing, I want everybody to remember what COVID felt like. And I remember somebody saying at the time, this is impacting the kids more than you think. And I remember thinking, I don't know about that, man. Like if you can't see the effects right now, what are the odds that it has like some long and lingering effect? But now seeing how what's happening in Japan is actually COVID related, I'm like, whoa, that's crazy. So this is years later. It's finally working its way. The wolves are finally eating the first people at the edge of the forest. And you're like, holy shit, the kid was right. There really were wolves hiding there, but it's taken years for it to play out. And so there are these long tail knock-on effects that I don't think people are being realistic about. And so when I look at all of this instability, I was pretty nonchalant about what was going on in Russia. I'm now thinking that's a big mistake. And so it's like, that's gonna, I think, be a bigger deal than we wanna think. Up to and including, does Putin get backed into a corner and lash out? It is very interesting watching the rhetoric coming out of Zelensky. Zelensky's always pulling his punches, which I give him a ton of credit for. He's trying not to be provocative to Russia, despite the fact that they're bombing the shit out of them every night. He keeps saying, hey, let's get to the negotiating table. We're killing this many Russians. We do not want to be doing this. This is not a source of pride. We would very much like to stop. And you could say that he's bullshitting and that that's not really true. My bet is that is true. And he would very much like to have a negotiation, redraw borders in some sort of sensible place, and be done with the aggression. I think he's going to be pretty aggro about getting into NATO for reasons that I think will be self-evident. And I'm sure Russia is going to be completely opposed to that. But nonetheless, man, when you look at that and you see that it's this completely destabilized thing, they're killing 30,000 people just on the Russian side. Forget what's happening on the Ukrainian side. Russians are losing 30,000 troops a month. So anyway, it's crazy. You've still got everything going on with Israel, Gaza, Lebanon, Hezbollah, Hamas, like all of that is still in play. Camps. I don't know what you mean by that. I mean, I think I do, but
Israel just built some for Palestine. Oh, I'm sorry, it's a resettlement colony. Because we love the Palestinians.
We're going to get into this. We should probably make that a separate segment. But flag planted, so that'll be fun. Drew and I will be able to collide on that. So yes, a lot of destabilization. The Iran war, as you very aptly said, is not going anywhere anytime soon. The US is on, by my estimation, take that for what it's worth, but we started a 10-year ticking clock 9 years ago. I mean, honestly, the clock has been ticking for a lot longer than that. And you can just look at the M2 money supply to see the problem. But that clock is ticking. We're now at 9 years. By my estimate, if nothing changes, you are going to have a crisis within that window. Crisis will be gigantic. And when the crisis happens, I know some people think that they're going to be fine. They're not going to be fine. That is a like everybody gets poor kind of situation. It's happened before, so you don't have to reach too far back into history to understand how devastating this shit can be. And I know the people like Marxists think, yeah, that's what we need. We need a revolution. We need to overturn the tables. Bro, it's not fun to live through, least of all for the people with the least resources. So yeah, no bueno. Thanks for watching this clip from the Tom Bilyeu Show. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe so you never miss one of these in the future. And if you want to catch us live, you can join us Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 7 a.m. Pacific time. I hope to see you there.